but we've had lots of bookkeepers who have used it who have said that just this skills test is worth its weight in gold, and is just that bit would be worth investing in the Pure Bookkeeping system just to get that piece right.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. I'm your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a fantastic one. I've got an absolute treat for you today. We are talking about the E-Myth Bookkeeper, and as you may have been listening, we've been doing several deep dives into chapters from the E-Myth Bookkeeper over the last couple of weeks. And we have another special guest. Well, we have two special guests today. We have Peter Cook, who you have already been introduced in those series. And if you haven't listened to those already, go back and give those a listen. But we also have the co-author of the E-Myth Bookkeeper, Debbie Roberts, who is also the co-founder of Pure Bookkeeping and has been at helping great bookkeepers grow their business for some time now. Debbie Roberts, Peter Cook, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. Good to be back.
Thank you, Michael.
It's great to have you both. Yes.
I was
welcome.
showing. My daughters were very impressed because on the Apple Podcast app, I was showing them flicking through the What's Coming Up podcasts, and my name was right there in the
Wow.
Successful Bookkeeper podcast. So they were very impressed. They think I'm a little bit famous now.
What's celebrity like?
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Are your kids impressed that you host a podcast or not at all?
Absolutely. Whenever it comes on, so if I'm listening to podcasts in a drive or something like that, they will, mine might pop up and I'm like, oh, turn that off. And we're going to listen to something else here, but they're like, no, play it. So it's kind of cool. Yeah. Definitely. They're very impressed.
Awesome.
Yes. Debbie, welcome. How have you been?
Very well, Michael. I'm very excited to be here and having this conversation with you today.
Yes. Now, also for you listener joining us today, you may have, if you haven't, go back to the very first episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast back in 2016. That is the episode with Debbie Roberts, where we actually, Debbie, you are the inspiration and the story behind the Successful Bookkeeper. And when I wrote that book, it really was a book about your journey in building your business. And then you also went on to write E-Myth Bookkeeper and many other things. So it's a treat, listener, to have Debbie here today, and you can get to know her better on those episodes.
Privileged.
I didn't realize that. So Debbie is actually the Successful Bookkeeper behind the Successful Bookkeeper.
She is, yeah.
Wow.
I am. And it's a privilege to be here.
Yeah. It's an interesting story because your story, for years, it resonated. Anytime we told people your story, anybody that was, a bookkeeper growing their bookkeeping business, and if I tell them Debbie Roberts' story, they're like, that's my story. Whatever journey they're in, whether they're just getting started, whether they're, going from a startup to transitioning to business, building their practice, or running a very successful firm, when they hear your story, they say, that's my story. And so everyone that's listening to this episode or to this podcast really is the Successful Bookkeeper at some phase of their journey, or stage of their journey, I should say. So yeah, it was a lot of fun writing that book with you, Debbie. And it's been quite a ride here with this podcast, but it all started really innocently.
Yes, it is a privilege, really. I love sharing the story, my story, because it is true, it is real, and it is relatable. It's the same story. And interestingly, after all these years, it's still happening. People are still struggling and having the same challenges or very similar challenges to what I had when I was growing my business.
Yes. And Deb, maybe it's always lovely to hear it from you, but maybe just give us a recap of your story getting into this. And then for you, listener, where we're going today with this is we're going to actually be talking about Chapter 10. Chapter 10 is all about hiring great bookkeepers into your business, and Debbie has some great stories about that. But Deb, I'd really love it if you gave a refresher as to your story, how you got into all of this.
Yes. Well, I was always doing bookkeeping since I left school, and wanted to start my own business, and finally took the plunge and did that. And within 12 to 18 months, my books were filled. So I was working nights and weekends. I was cleaning up messes left behind. There were so many messes that I was cleaning up. Some were left by the clients themselves, and some were left by inexperienced bookkeepers. And so I kept getting new clients because number one marketing strategy for most bookkeepers, Pete would say, is do a good job and referrals will come. So that's what happened. I kept getting referrals, and I didn't want to turn them away because my mission, my passion was about empowering business owners around their finances. So I knew I could help that next person and the next person and the next person. But it gets to a point where you're full up and you're working nights. I was working nights and weekends. The tax deadlines were crazy. Every quarter, a lot filing and things like that. And I was on a treadmill. I felt like a hamster, on a treadmill, and going round and round with the deadlines off and the deadlines on and bass off, my husband used to call it. And I thought, I think I know what I need, because I don't want to turn away clients. So I need to find a bookkeeper who can take some of the work off me. That's okay. That sounds fairly straightforward. But then I would think back to all the messes that I'd cleaned up from inexperienced or bad bookkeepers. And I thought, well, I didn't want to damage my reputation. I didn't trust anyone. I was a control freak anyway. Most bookkeepers are. Mm-hmm. And no one seemed to do it the way I did it. So I thought, I don't know what the answer is. So I went on and off this treadmill of trying to figure out how to solve my problem. And I would just put it aside and go, okay, I'm too busy anyway. I've got to get going with these deadlines. And then I met Peter Cook at a networking function and discovered that he was a business coach. And I went, oh, you probably know something that I don't know, because I know a lot about bookkeeping, but I know nothing about growing a bookkeeping business. And I've got this problem. And so the very first meeting, Pete said, this startling revelation: do you think if you took the systems that you've got in your head and document those and then train another bookkeeper to do them, would that work? And I thought about it for a moment and I said, well, yeah, that sounds logical. What time of the day am I supposed to do that? Like, I'm already full up. It's like midnight to dawn, sleep is for the weak, all those sorts of things. But he gave me a copy of the original E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And that resonated with me and was the beginning of my journey, and the beginning certainly of the journey that Peter Cook and I had over the following 10 years.
And then 15 years beyond that, Deb.
And then 15 years beyond that as well.
Wow, 25 years. This has been going on since that question of what would happen if you took all of those ideas, thoughts, systems out of your head and put them into paper and gave them to your staff. And so quite a ride.
Yes. It was definitely a ride. I will, and I have admitted in the book and publicly everywhere else that I've made every conceivable mistake you could make in recruiting. And it was painful, and there were, so many lessons. And anyway, we're going to talk about that now.
Yes, definitely. We're going to talk about the hiring, chapter 10, the hiring. And, it does bring up one of the key things that's just been very common in the last couple of episodes that I've done. The listener will be able to relate to this and hearing some of our other guests, is that the mistakes are going to be there. And, it's this, you don't even know what those mistakes might be until you've gone through them. And we could tell people about the mistakes, but until you've gone through them, really understanding the impact that they have and the value of not making those mistakes. And you've made a lot, Debbie, but you've also made a lot of great decisions and figured things out. And that's the key here. So let's maybe talk about, after you started writing these systems and documenting, you had staff following them. Tell a little bit of that story, and then we'll get into the point where we want to hear your story about your hiring journey, because that really is the story of this chapter.
Yes, the documenting the systems was very difficult, because when you're a good bookkeeper, when you're an experienced bookkeeper, you've got all this process in your head that you don't even really think about. It's almost subconscious. It's so second nature to you. You don't actually think, okay, so now I click on this and I go to there, and then I've got to do this other thing. So when you actually need to document them, you think, well, what do I need to write? What do I need to teach? Surely everyone does it like this. Why do I don't need to say all these minute steps? But it's so important. And that the tricky thing about writing, the way I developed my systems was when someone would actually make a mistake. Because I had assumed that they wouldn't do something, or they would do something in a particular way, I thought, well, I don't need to document that because they will know how to do that, or they'll do it this particular way. So, and then I'd go, you didn't, why did you do that? Why did you do it like that? Or how come okay, there's another system I need to document. So another step that I need to explain and make sure that they follow, and training and things like that. It was really the systems that one day, that first day that Pete said, if you take everything out of your head and document that, from that day, it took me 6 years to document those systems. We've estimated it was about 2 years full time to do that. But over, because I was still running my business, I was recruiting, I was making mistakes, I was, growing and marketing and all these sorts of things. So, and in between that, someone would make a mistake and I would then document that system, do it like this, don't do it like that. And I would train up the staff to the same high level. But until I got my systems right, it was, well, not only excruciating, but I then had to pay. What I did was, because I didn't have documented systems, I would pay what I called supervisors, staff who were more advanced, had more advanced skills, to actually check the work of my bookkeepers. And that was a very costly, because my systems weren't sufficient, because I hadn't documented that adequately, I had to pay their supervisors, and that was a very costly decision, which at one point in my business, in fact, in 2007, my business nearly went under, because I was paying people to check the work because the systems weren't sufficient, and I was paying other people to check the work of the staff. And it should have been the systems that were actually doing that, not a person. That was a turning point in my business. I then spent the next 18 months working harder than I'd ever had, to actually document those systems fully and train all the staff, and got to a point where I didn't need those supervisors.
Remarkable. So much goes into it, and that's the thing that people often, we've talked about this, Peter, in our conversations over the last couple episodes where we've dug into this. The systems, people underestimate what's required to have a documented set of instructions to repeat successfully and with quality any task. And then you take bookkeeping and all that goes with that, and the importance of it, and the intricacies of multi-business and all of that, the amount of time and energy you've just explained, and that's what it takes. 2 years full time, plus a heck of a lot of mistakes and figuring out.
Yes, and my saying is, if you put 10 bookkeepers in a room, there would be 10 different ways of doing the same thing, and some of them would be wrong. And that is the core, the fundamental core of the problem. Everyone does it slightly differently. Their experience is different. Their thinking, their logic, their knowledge, just so many factors come into play in one person when they're doing the bookkeeping. So it isn't true that surely everyone would do it like this. It is actually true that if you put 10 bookkeepers in a room, there would be 10 different ways of doing the same thing, and some of them would be wrong.
That's right. Peter, as all this was going on with Debbie, you were coaching her through this and keeping her accountable and cheerleading probably a lot of the time. What was your perspective? What did you see over these years of Debbie doing this?
So we had a clear picture of what a successful bookkeeping business looked like, which was our kind of North Star of a team of great bookkeepers following systems that documented how Debbie did the bookkeeping. We definitely didn't realise the gap between where we were and that vision. Like, that took us a lot longer than we thought, and Deb said almost went broke. Had to put money into the business at one point, and that was largely due to, I think, to what we're talking about today, to recruiting errors, to not getting the HR right. And the thing that was extraordinary was Debbie's persistence. Debbie didn't waver, and once we had that belief in, okay, this is how we get to a successful bookkeeping business, she was relentless, and we ended up with kind of the next chapter of our story together was we ended up with the best systems that Debbie had created in the industry. But I think, kind of rewinding to what we're here to talk about today, the recruiting was the last piece of the puzzle. We got the systems for how to do the bookkeeping right. We got the sales and marketing systems right, so we had a steady stream of new clients. We were doing, but we didn't have the recruiting right, and that nearly sent the business under. And I was just reading, looking back at the E-Myth Bookkeeper, Debbie, you say in the book, you say, getting hiring wrong is excruciating. Believe me, I've made more mistakes in HR than any other bookkeeper in the world.
That's great.
And it is excruciating getting it wrong.
Yes. Well, let's maybe jump into that, because, if you think about it, you've got all these systems, you've got the hiring, your clients coming in, and now it's almost, the thought is, well, we've got all the systems, the hiring should be easy, right?
Yeah.
Because we just put a person into the systems and it's all good, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So how did it go?
No, it didn't go like that as planned at all. And I think the reason, one of the contributing factors is, as a bookkeeper, most bookkeepers, myself included, are not trained in HR. We don't know how to assess a resume. We don't know how to conduct a proper interview. We don't know how to test people, because we've well, we're not trained. We're not trained in that. So, and it is very specific testing and interview techniques and things like that you need for the bookkeeping industry. So it's not just an off-the-shelf one. We did actually discuss this as an option, Pete and I. Maybe we should just outsource it. We just outsource it. Just get a recruitment agency to find a bookkeeper. But there were two reasons why that wasn't feasible. One is the cost, and the second one is the frequency that you need to keep recruiting. So it's not, you don't just, if you're growing a business and really scaling, fast, you may need to recruit 2 or 3 times a year. And then you multiply that, like that's every year you're putting on, and some of them will leave and what have you. So when we looked at it, we just agreed that we needed to create a system around the HR so that I could become good at it. And that was the beginning of that journey of creating the HR process.
Yeah, makes sense. And so I'd love to hear how you landed on and started hiring. I love your story about the first client that you brought this, you had hired an accountant, I think it was.
Yeah. Classic.
I'd love to hear that story.
Classic. Well, as I said, I wasn't trained in HR. I would believe what people told me. I didn't think they would actually. Well, Pete always says it's not necessarily that they're lying, but they kind of almost believe that they are as good as what their resume sounds like. So, and because I figured, well, it's bookkeeping. Yeah, okay. You know how to use the software. Great. You've got 2 years experience or X amount of it. Great. Look, that seems fine. Let's have a quick chat. And okay, I like the way we're interacting. Let's get started. So that was my interview testing, and well, in fact, my testing technique was taking them to, and this was on site. This particular one was on site with a client, and I had already edified this accountant. I was actually really excited about having an accountant on my team because I thought, where might this go? I might be able to do tax stuff and expand the business into other areas. This was even before he started. I was so excited. And so I edified him with the client and said, now I'll come with him and we'll sit down and have the first session together, and I'll stay for as long as, because, the client's a bit nervous. Now, I only really trust you, Debbie. And I went, yes, I know, but reassured him it's going to be okay and all of that sort of thing. Sat the person, the bookkeeper, accountant, in front of the computer, explained the overview of the work, and I said, so put these bills in. Here's all these bills. So this is manual, there weren't bank feeds and all that sorts of things and receipt capturing software and all of that. It was manually data entering, which might be a novel idea for some bookkeepers nowadays. So I said, just put the bills in. And he sat there with his hand on the mouse, looking around at the software, trying to find out what part of that accounting software package do you click on to enter the bill. And I was looking at him. I wish you could see my face right now. I was kind of staring at him, going, yes, now you can start. Just enter the bills now. And he would be looking around the screen. He'd be moving his mouse around the screen. He would glance down at me out of the corner of his eye, wondering what I would be thinking. And then it was like for minutes. I sat there. I don't even know why I lasted that long, but it was minutes. And I said, don't you? I thought you knew how to use the software. And he actually said, well, I thought I did. And I went, well, obviously not as well. Expletives and what have you. Yeah. So then I had this vision of the ground opening up and just sucking me out of I couldn't bear the thought of walking out of the office to that client after 5 minutes and saying, I'm sorry, this didn't work out. And I've lost my credibility. What am I going to say when I find the next bookkeeper? I'm going to say, I found another bookkeeper. This one's going to be fantastic. You know, I mean, you just lose credibility. And I thought, I just want the earth to open up and suck me out of this whole planet. I'm done. And I actually remember driving home that day, screaming. I rang Pete. I was yelling at him. And I said, I quit. I'm not doing this anymore. If we don't find a way of testing these bookkeepers before I put them in front of a client, that's it. But, it's not going to work. This whole vision that we've got, the plan we've got, the 10-year plan and all that, nah, it's not going to work. It's just, and I ranted and ranted and ranted. And I think it was the next day, Pete,
Yeah.
you came to my office and said, okay, Pete doesn't normally get hands-on with the work that needs to be done, but he said, we are actually going to create a skills test in the software. We're going to do everything. Now tell me what are you going to test? And it was we just created the whole program, which is absolutely brilliant. And surprisingly, so many people fail it.
Mm.
Yeah. So what we created was saying that we don't just need to hear from somebody who wants to do the job how good they think they are or how good they tell us they are. We actually want a number that can tell us how good they are at bookkeeping. And so we created, it was essentially a mini bookkeeping job, which we said, what are all the things that you might do in a bookkeeping, typical bookkeeping for a client, and then we created a dummy client in the software, and went, all right, and false invoices and a bank statement and the whole thing, and said, all right, here's the task. You need to enter these invoices, reconcile this bank account, et cetera, and then there would also be, like any normal bookkeeping job, there'd be some information that was missing, questions they needed to ask, things that didn't quite match up. And based on how they perform the task, we could give them a score out of 100. And then we would know quantitatively how good a bookkeeper they were. And as Debbie said, the surprising thing, and what we wanted was people to get a score out of 80 or higher for us to hire them. And that bookkeepers who had already had a phone interview and had a good resume, had the experience we needed, the qualifications we needed, had performed well on the phone interview, and then come in to do the skills test. So these are bookkeepers that we would have hired in the past, and more than 50% failed the skills test. And every time someone failed, Debbie went, phew, just dodged a bullet. And that, putting that skills test into the business, that was, like I said, the final piece of the puzzle. That meant from that point on, we only hired great bookkeepers, and that then got Debbie's business to the point where she had 12 great bookkeepers in her business, was what we call a black belt business in the book, and a business that only needed Debbie a day a week, that was doing several $100,000 revenue, a team of 12, and Debbie was actually spending most of her time in pure bookkeeping. She was just there a day a week and not doing any of the bookkeeping herself.
Remarkable. And, if you think about any kind of hiring, having some kind of metric to tell you, to predict the future, really.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, that in itself is remarkable. And was it challenging to build the test?
No, actually, building the test was, like, once we'd worked out that's what we needed to do, I think we did it in a day. I don't think, like, the original version the the hard bit was getting to the point of going, okay, we need to actually be able to sit down and somebody to do a test and get a score. And of course, we've now replicated that. So that was in MYOB, the software in Australia that Debbie was using. We've now, in Pure Bookkeeping, we've replicated that test in QBO for Canada and for the US, and in Xero and in other softwares and other jurisdictions. But we've now had hundreds and hundreds of bookkeepers around the world using these tests and validating the data as a way to hire bookkeepers. And so the test is one part of one module in the Pure Bookkeeping system. But we've had lots of bookkeepers who have used it who have said that just this skills test is worth its weight in gold, and is just that bit would be worth investing in the Pure Bookkeeping system just to get that piece right.
Absolutely. And, I met someone who had invested in the Pure Bookkeeping system. They were a bookkeeper, had a whole bunch of staff. She gave the test to all of them. They all failed. And she barely passed.
Yeah.
And she was really excited about it because she really, it was a way for her to know that it quantified where she was.
Yeah.
And she was really clear what she needed to do. She just needed to improve on a few areas. And also the system really supported her in delivering a fantastic way of doing the compliance work. And so she turned the business completely, went right back to zero with herself and rebuilt from there. And then whoever she hired, she used the system.
Fabulous story.
Yes. And Debbie, Peter mentioned you got to the point, you had the systems on how to do the work. You had the marketing systems, you had the hiring systems, 12 staff working for you, and you're working one day a week and having freedom to get away from the business. Do you remember what it was like when you realized that was the case?
Oh, yes. I still vividly remember the very first time we went away on a holiday, and I had a bookkeeper doing the client's work, and she rang me up to ask me a question, and I answered the question, and I hung up, and I said to my husband, Neil, I said, I've just earned this amount of money today and I haven't done one bit of work. It was a surreal kind of feeling, and validation of everything that we've been doing and all the work that we had done for the years before that. And it was kind of, yes, this is working. It's only one, it's just little. And it was just for a few hours that day, but I still remember that quite vividly.
Remarkable. And so that's chapter 10. That's hiring great bookkeepers. Peter, anything to add about this chapter?
Yeah, the key takeaway, I think, firstly is you've got to. It's a numbers game. So recruiting is like sales; it's a numbers game. You have to be willing to look at lots of resumes, to actually meet lots of people, and to get the right person. The quote at the start of the chapter, which I really like, is from Steve Jobs, who said, "The secret of my success is we have gone to exceptional lengths to hire the best people in the world." And so I think that you have to firstly make that your aim is to hire great bookkeepers. You don't want to get an adequate person. You actually want great people in your business. And then the second bit is you actually just have to see their work. Like if you can do it through a skills test, like we've got where you actually get a number, that's even better. But even if you can't do that, make sure you actually see them working, and you learn a lot more from sitting next to somebody watching them do bookkeeping than you will from talking to them about how to do bookkeeping. Yeah, and the final bit I'd say about it is like a question that we often get asked when we're running seminars and talking about this is, why would a great bookkeeper want to work in my business? Why wouldn't they just want to be on their own where they could earn more money? And the answer to that is, like, we show the org chart of the business where we say, if you're running the business, you're doing the leadership and the management and the HR and the marketing and the sales and the bookkeeping and the admin. There's a lot of great bookkeepers who would just love to be able to show up, do the bookkeeping and not have to worry about everything else. And if you're doing all the rest for them, you're finding them the clients, you're placing them there, then that's a fabulous deal for them, that they get to do the bit they're good at and they love, and they don't have the stress of running the business. And there's plenty of great bookkeepers who that's what they're looking for, and you're a fabulous solution for them and they're a fabulous solution for you. And you just need to find that.
Remarkable. It's an exciting time, and this book really lays out a roadmap to building a successful business. And I want to thank both of you for being on the show. It's been an incredible journey with both of you, and I look forward to hearing stories from our listener. Where are they doing it right? Where are they going to start to do it differently? And where are they making mistakes? If you'd like to get a copy of the eMyth Bookkeeper, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com/eMyth. And we have on that page a special offer that you can get the book and some programs that you can take, one of them being the 7 Secrets of Growing Your Bookkeeping Business. You get a copy of the eMyth Bookkeeper with that. And read along with the series that we've put together. And if you have questions, we'd love to hear from you as well. If you have questions about the book, you want to ask Peter or Debbie any questions about the book or their journeys, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. Debbie, Peter, anything that you'd like to say before we let you go and say goodbye?
Thank you. Congratulations to you, Michael. We're getting ever closer to 500 episodes. It's an extraordinary effort. When you're talking about Debbie on the first episode back 8 years ago, that's extraordinary also. And also to I love what you said about every bookkeeper who's listening is also the successful bookkeeper, just on a different stage of the journey. And I think I'd love that for anyone listening to this to go, okay, there were points on Debbie's journey where it didn't feel like it was successful. And so even if it doesn't feel like it's successful right now, if you think about the 10-year journey, if you keep going, I've no doubt you'll also achieve your vision. The key part of that is being clear on what it is and then just keeping on going.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I would say that it's just to encourage you as well, all the listeners, as Pete said, keep an eye on your vision. It's really, the reason I was persistent and relentless was because I had a big vision to replace my husband's income in 10 years. And I knew the only way I could do that was to grow a successful bookkeeping business. And that was the burning in my belly. That was the fire in my belly that kept me persistent and continuing on and overcoming the challenges and finding another, how do we do this, and correcting the mistakes and learning from your mistakes. A mistake is not the end of the game. The mistake is an opportunity to learn. And the reason you would do that is because of your vision. Get clear about what your vision is and work towards it and be persistent with it. I wish you every success. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. And with that, we will wrap another episode. I want to thank both of you for your generosity in being on the show. And it's always a pleasure. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guests and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.